Hello, everyone. Welcome to a breaking it all down count. Welcome to a vlog. I'll do a big old spiel there, but nah. So, yesterday I went and I saw The Hobbit. I'd been meaning to see it sooner, but life gets in the way, and I wanted to see it with family, and so forth and so on. So, I finally got to see it yesterday, just in time for New Year's Eve. And I enjoyed it. I knew coming in, this is part one of a trilogy. So there's going to be a certain degree of I'm setting stuff up here, so be more focused on setup than stuff happening. Though stuff happens, but it's kind of weird-ish. Because with the Lord of the Rings movies, it was one book per movie, and it worked very well. They fit a lot of material in there in a relatively short period of time compared to the books. Did a good job of trimming things down to a manageable pacing and making it so what is for some people, even intelligent, well-educated people, not that there's anything wrong if you have this problem, is some people find Tolkien's works impenetrable. Some find Tolkien's work slow, plodding, boring, and various other things which I can't totally argue with. Tolkien is a writer who has, while he has a great vision of a world that he creates, he has his problems. And I understand the books aren't for everyone. If you can't get through them, that doesn't make you a bad person. So I understand why some people enjoy the movies considerably more, because they really make for a better movie. Whereas if you shot the books basically as written as films, which is what Christopher Tolkien has said that he wanted and what he dislikes about the films, you would have the most boring, execrable pieces of cinematic atrocity that had ever been made on the history of film. If you were to adapt the books word for word. So, now we have The Hobbit, and it's taking a different route of one book, 3 movies. And, well, for this first installment, it kind of works. The changes made are pretty good, because one of the problems that The Hobbit has is they kind of yank away... There's several problems. One of the ones that it comes into, which, when you get to film, is a thing that you kind of have to deal with, is the book keeps yanking out Gandalf every now and then. With not much in terms of explanation. And the movie does a better job of that. Because it basically kind of, through back channels and that sort of thing, fits in stuff from Tolkien's other work, which explains what Gandalf's doing during this, and also ties it all into the Lord of the Rings. By which I mean they're dealing with the necromancer. In Tolkien's writings, and in the book, I'll try not to spoil this. I'll get to this after a little spoiler break. But let's say we have the necromancer as sort of a secondary antagonist, where he is a thing. He is a big bad thing. If you've seen The Lord of the Rings, they do a good job of basically implying this is who the necromancer is fairly early on. But if you haven't seen The Lord of the Rings, I won't spoil it for you. I'll get to that after a little break. Let's talk about other stuff first. Acting-wise, the performances in here are all very good. Ian McKellen is one of those actors... Ian McKellen and Christopher Lee are two actors who, honestly, even when they're in terrible material, particularly Christopher Lee, when you some of like the Fu Manchu Hammer films, he is an actor who really cannot phone it in. He does a good job. He recognizes that, hey, at least pretty early in his career, they only remember your last movie, so do your best no matter what, even if you think the movie is bad, and try to salvage the role if you do think it's bad, and ultimately leading to a better film. For example, the Dracula films, he didn't like a script material that he was given, so rather than delivering terrible lines of dialogue, he refused to do dialogue, but instead put all his effort into making an impressive physical performance for Count Dracula, and that more than made up for it. It made the character certainly more menacing than perhaps he was spouting whatever dialogue was in the original script. So yeah, Christopher Lee, excellent job. Ian McKellen, excellent job. Martin Freeman as Bilbo. I mean, they had to recast Bilbo because honestly, Ian Holm in young age makeup for the whole movie, it would probably be uncomfortable and rough on Ian Holm, and it would probably look weird to the audience. Martin Freeman did an excellent job. He really works as Bilbo, and between this and not Watson in Sherlock, but as Arthur Dent in the Disney live-action Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy movie, he really works for this sort of everyman character caught up in events that are bigger than him. And I like that with the guy. I like that with his work. He is an actor who I'm definitely gonna, if I see his name on a movie in the future, unless it's something like New Year's Day or Valentine's Day or one of those, we're casting every actor who has time off to, or isn't working for a while, to do two scenes, one of those kind of movies, I'll probably kind of check it out, because Martin Freeman is becoming an actor who I say he can do no wrong, but he improves movies that he's in. The dwarves. The dwarves are kind of a weird case, because in the book you have 13 dwarves. Each of their own personalities. But in the book, they kind of don't have a lot of screen time in terms of Thorin gets lines, Bomber occasionally gets lines, maybe a dwarf here and there gets lines every now and then, and you kind of and it's hard to give them personality or that sort of thing in your head in the book because they're on so rarely. So the thing that basically Peter Jackson and Guillermo del Toro, who also worked on the script and was really supposed to direct this until basically things fell through related to the MGM bankruptcy and that sort of thing, as MGM's co-producing this, is you have to give all of these dwarves their own character and make them so that when you look on screen you can tell, okay, that's Feely, that's Keely, that's Oin or Gloin or whatever. And so, as opposed to just, okay, the fat one's Bomber, the boss one is Thorin, the old guy is Balin, and forget about everyone else. So this was a good job of setting all this up. Setting all this up, saying about the characters, and also showing, actually, that these guys can possibly pull it off. Which leads to another discussion here of the tone of the film. The Hobbit, the original story as written, was a children's story. It was a story that was written by Tolkien for his son, Christopher. And it was influenced by books like a story called The Princess and the Goblin, which Tolkien later, he liked it when he was younger, he realized it wasn't very good. It's as we often do. But he's kind of influenced by that, and making a children's adventure story. It's like, not quite the kiddie version of Beowulf, but kind of. And so there's a fair amount of humor in there, particularly related to Bilbo and other things, trolls and so forth and so on. And the movie does a good job of getting into that. It sets up a framing device of Bilbo's writing There and Back Again, A Hobbit's Holiday. We start off with Ian Holm as old Bilbo at Bag End, starting the book before the long-expected party in Fellowship. And then, as opposed to the unexpected party, which is how it starts out, but anyway. And it kind of lets them get away with this sort of somewhat humorous tone, because it's being recounted by Bilbo Baggins for audiences that maybe don't necessarily understand Hobbits, because Bilbo leaves in the Fellowship, and there's a distinct possibility that his intention is, I'm going to leave the book on the shelf at Rivendell, or something like that. Something. Maybe have somebody make a copy of it and take it back to Hobbit something. So he's writing his book. That gives us a certain degree of, I don't say unreliable narratorness to this, as much as gives us, to a certain extent, it just explains that this is a reason for the humor. Let's there be humor and more characters in ways that do orcs and stuff, in ways that the Lord of the Rings didn't, where you didn't have that many named antagonist orcs or what have you, or goblins and that sort of thing. So it leads to my next bit. Is the complaint with the frame narrative. It runs long, though. I understand why it's there, because we need to set up the tone on why it tonally, while it's still sort of actionish fantasy story like with Fellowship and the rest of Lord of the Rings, it's also a little more humorous than those. So we need a tonal explanation for that. And he also serves to give us some backstory by explaining the history of the Lonely Mountain and the Kingdom of Erebor, which is where the Lonely Mountain is, and the whole thing of Smaug. But that we get a cameo from Frodo in there, which we don't need, when really all we needed was Bilbo sits down, puts a pin, writes in prologue, story of Erebor, and then in the hole in the ground there lived a hobbit, and we start. We didn't need that quite being so long. Then once it gets started, it goes well. And the book does a good job of fitting in some of Tolkien's poetry and singing and stuff there in ways that work. We get most of the Chip the Glasses Crack the Plates song the dwarves do during the Unexpected Party in its entirety. And they do it, and they make it serve a purpose, in that for these dwarves, these 13 dwarves, they think, 13 dwarves versus a dragon which armies couldn't beat, going across long tracts of terrain against unknown dangers, how these people stand a chance? And they use this song to set up, maybe they can do it, by having them basically sort of demonstrating feats of agility, physical aptitude, and that sort of thing. Not like bench pressing tables or that sort of thing, but that these people work together as a team, that they are dexterous, clever, and while they're not necessarily as bright as Gandalf or Bilbo, and they're certainly all a bunch of really stubborn guys because they're dwarves, and dwarves' primary trait is stubborn and obnoxious. They also have the physical abilities where once they get to the dragon, if they can catch him off guard, maybe they can succeed in their task. And they can get through all the other physical dangers along the way. They have the skill to do it. And that's good. That's it works. It's basically like the inverse of Bombadil. Bombadil in Lord of the Rings, Tom Bombadil, when he shows up, stops the plot dead. He no-sells the menace of the ring by saying, this is just a paltry trifle thing. Like, there's a sleight of hand thing where he makes it disappear and reappear. Like, it makes the audience go, why doesn't he leave it with Bombadil? And it's like, because he's too unaffected by it. Bombadil undermines some of the menace of the ring in the story. Whereas this song, the Chip the Glasses Cracks the Plate song, could have done the Bombadil thing if it stops the plot dead, spends time with a stupid musical number, but it serves a purpose by demonstrating, the dwarves have a great deal of physical aptitude and ability, and they have the brawn and the physical skill. With all they need is people with the mental acumen, the Gandalf, the Bilbo, to a certain degree also the Thorin and Balin, to get them through the rest of the story. And get them through the rest of this journey and ultimately possibly overcome the dragon. So it serves a purpose. It doesn't stop the plot dead. It keeps things moving, and it gives the audience information. That is how you write stuff like that. That's how you incorporate stuff like that into film. That said, the one minus to all this, and with the prologue and stuff earlier, is this means that one of my favorite songs from the book is cut. Or greatly limited, which is the Misty Mountain song, the upon the misty mountains cold, caverns deep and dungeons old, that thing. I'm mangling the lyrics and singing very poorly. And you gotta sing it in a much deeper voice than I do, than my mind goes. And that's kind of the one minus of what they do for the prologue. Is, rather than just going hole of ground that lived a hobbit and have Bilbo writing that, is if they carry that information, is that the song basically covers all of the information given in the prologue bit of concerning Erebor, the fall of Erebor and the coming of Smaug. And the exposition works as it is now, but I almost feel that it could have worked better if done over the song. Like, the dwarves sing the song which describes the coming of Smaug and the fall of Erebor, and they just had the images of that over that, so like Bilbo's imagination of what happened, somewhat. But other than that, there's one other song that's cut. They don't do 15 birds and 5 fir trees, which is the orcs, we've got the dwarves where we want them, we're going to taunt them song. But I kind of get that because, well, the other thing is, my next point is, with the languages. For Lord of the Rings, they fit a fair amount of Tolkien's conlang, or constructed languages in there. A fair amount of Elvish, a little bit of Black speech here and there. Occasionally a small smattering of Dwarvish, particularly in the extended cuts. But the Orcs speak English, the Uruk-hai speak English, and other than that, aside from smatterings of Elvish and some Black speech in from Sauron, when the ring is being worn by Frodo, that's about all of the Tolkien's language work you're getting as far as what you're hearing. Here, they bring a lot more of that constructed language stuff in there, and all of it's subtitled, or almost all of it's subtitled. Dwarven, Elvish. Lots of Black speech. Lots of subtitled Black speech. We have the orcs. We have our Azog, our main villain. We have an orcish villain who talks to his underlings, and he's talking in Black speech with subtitles the whole time, and it's great. I get the impression here of like that Peter Jackson and possibly also Guillermo del Toro went, orcs will talk orcish amongst themselves. With no one else there to hear them. Elves will talk Elvish amongst themselves. Dwarves will talk Dwarvish amongst themselves. We should do that and subtitle it if we don't have a intermediary character who doesn't speak that language there who needs to understand it. Like, for example, the English-speaking mountain trolls and the 3 troll scene, which works fairly well. So, action, very good. I watched this in 2D. I did not watch this in 3D. And I guess to a degree, the way that you can tell how well a movie that was also released in 3D really holds up is how well it works in 2D. An example of this is the third Friday the 13th movie has lots of big old 3D gags. And to the point where they start affecting the horror of the film, where it's like, there should be a tense, suspenseful scene or what have you, but the payoff of the scene isn't either the not scare or the actual scare or the kill, but the payoff is the kill, but it's the kill in doing some sort of 3D gimmickry to just toss 3D at you, literally. And there are several shots in this film which I feel like we did this. There's only serves the purpose of having to show off the 3D and the 48 frames per second. To a certain extent, the chip the glasses, crack the plate scene does some of that, because you're having the dwarves kind of tossing around the plates and that sort of thing, but not breaking them. And we have, oh look, fast stuff flying around, including at the camera and that sort of thing. Stuff moving forwards and backwards and taking advantage of depth of field. On the one hand, that makes sense. That's clearly gimmickry, but it's gimmickry that serves a purpose. But there's this other bit here. It's in the book, but it's kind of cool. It's done in the movie, but it's kind of iffy, and it's clearly done just for 3D. There's a bit where the party, the band, is going through the mountains, and the book stone giants rise up the mountains and get in a fight with each other and throwing rocks and beating the tar out of each other and that sort of thing. We get a little action set piece in the movie. And this is clearly, we need some more spectacle for the 3D stuff. And that's how they did it. On the other hand, you don't totally need it, because right after this is Goblin Town. And Goblin Town gives you plenty of 3D spectacle. Goblin Town is also in the books. It's also a major set piece of the books. Like, practically the first half. And I feel like the Stone Giants bit probably could have been cut or toned down a bit. Less major 3D or something. Didn't necessarily need to be a big action set piece. So, got that done. Let's get the spoiler stuff. So, here be spoilers. Said that long enough, you're warned now. As far as for stuff, so this film is very clearly, we are setting stuff up for the next two movies. It is laying groundwork for things. In particular, the secondary plot, which lets us stretch this out to two movies and explains why Gandalf is missing, and the main plot of dealing with Smaug. The movie does a good job of not showing Smaug at length, which is the right thing to do. Smaug is, once we see him in all his glory, and we don't see him as described in the book until the very end, not quite the very end, until, I have a dog barking, give me a second. Alright, I'm back. Sorry about that. So, setting up for future movies. In particular, so we have the setting up the Necromancer. If you're familiar with the Lord of the Rings stuff, you may know, the Necromancer is Sauron. Sauron has been mostly dissolved and lost his strength. Sorry about that. Since, he was defeated by the Great Alliance way back when in the days of Isildur. And now he is slowly starting to reconstitute himself. And in his weakly powered form at Dol Guldur in Mirkwood, what is now at this point called the Greenwood, but is become known as Mirkwood, and coalescing his forces there. We have, that leads toward the new character. New in air quotes, because he's one of the existing established wizards in the setting of the Astarte, but we don't see him very much in the books. In fact, he's never on camera in the books. Radagasta Brown, who's played here by Sylvester McCoy. And I see Radagast as being something of a you love him or you hate him character. Sylvester McCoy, my favorite Doctor, number 7. I enjoyed his stories, both on screen and in Big Finish audios. I think he's a very good actor. I enjoyed him, seeing him in the version of King Lear that the Royal Shakespeare Company did for the BBC, which was broadcast on PBS with Sir Ian McKellen as Lear and Sylvester McCoy as Lear's fool. He's a really good actor. I enjoy his work, and I enjoy his work here. He can come across as being a little too silly, and they do play a bunch of stuff, but it's kind of a little more silly related to the fact that Radagast the Brown he's kind of the wilderness one. Saruman paints himself as the authority figure of the Astari. Gandalf is kind of the wandering advisor and that sort of thing. He shows up where he's needed, or he thinks he's needed, provides advice to people to get them through problems, and then disappears. His thing is to make himself a fixture of all of Middle-earth. And then Radagast is his thing, how he prefers to basically do the job of the Astari, which is in the Tolkien mythos. They go around and help people, but they're not there to solve everyone's problems for them. They're there to help people through problems and that sort of thing. It's kind of how some views of Christianity depict the angels. In fact, describing the Astari as angels is a fairly reasonable way to do it. In that the wizards will show up, they will get hands-on, but ultimately their job is to let you do it yourself and make it so you can do it yourself, and helps you overcome other more supernatural obstacles as opposed to more personal stuff. It's complicated. I'm not going to go to full-on Silmarillion Tolkien cosmology thing, but anyway. Radagast's role, or the way he chooses to do his good work, is through monitoring the woods and wild places of the world, because those are the places where evil can choose to coalesce, and in this case it has, with the necromancer gathering his strength at the long since presumed abandoned fortress of Dol Guldur. And they do a fairly decent way of setting up that it is the necromancer. The necromancer is Sauron. Through several different ways. Radagast is attacked by a spectral figure, which is clearly meant to be one of the Nazgul, not in their Black Rider cloak and armor form. And when he sort of drives the not full strength Nazgul back, it leaves a Morgul blade. And Sauron's the only one who makes Morgul blades. You want nice, pretty, shiny, highly crafted swords, you go to the elves. If you want kind of rough-looking but durable, last forever axes and swords, you go to the dwarves. You want something that looks that looks evil, you go to Sauron. And this looks like something that came out of that doesn't quite have Made in Mordor stamped on the blade, but it kind of does. And so it does a good job of setting up. Or if you've seen the Lord of the Rings movies, even if you're not big Tolkien fan, if you never read all of his stuff or a significant chunk of his stuff, you can be like, okay, the Necromancer's Sauron. And so setting up this bit here, which in turn gives us a reason to have, later on in the story, and even in this one, have Gandalf keep leaving the party as a party, because otherwise it just seems dickish. Like, oh, Gandalf just fitted off again right when we need him. Why do we bring this guy along on the trip anyway? That doesn't make any sense. But here, it works because we give a reason for Gandalf to leave, which is there's some big stuff going down in Mirkwood, particularly in Mirkwood, particularly related to the Necromancer. And in the book later on, Gandalf in particular leaves the party for a very long extended period of time at Mirkwood. And this gives us a reason for why he's doing it, and allows us to show what he's been doing, which is the full investigation of Dol Guldur and possibly the cleansing of it. It also sets up some stuff which is kind of hinted at but never really coalesced together on screen, which is the White Council in the, which is basically kind of the elves plus the wizards working together, kind of keep an eye on Middle-earth and find out where evil is coalescing or what have you so they can deal with it. And this sets up the White Council. It also sets up that at this point, man hasn't, because of the fall of Isildur, man hasn't really stepped up to take a role in this sort of thing yet, either because they've been kept out of the picture or by choice. And so that this does that as well. So it works doubly in terms of setting up how we get to the events of Lord of the Rings and what happens there. And also in terms of giving us reasons for Gandalf's repeat absence and why Mirkwood is the way it is and that sort of thing. Smaug, and there's no reason to show all of Smaug here. We need to save for the money shot for the big Smaug and all his glory in film either 2 or 3, probably 3. And I guess that's the big things here. I enjoyed this film. I am definitely going to get it on DVD when it comes out, DVD or Blu-ray. I would definitely recommend you check it out. It's probably going to be in first-run theaters for the rest of this week, depending on where you are. It might make it, after this, it's probably going to go to your second or third-run theaters in the next few weeks. So, if you're looking to save some cash, that's a good way to do it. It'll also probably still be in 3D and doing the IMAX thing, because the next big IMAX film isn't out yet. They're doing a 3D re-release of Monsters, Inc., but they'll probably keep The Hobbit in the IMAX theaters, because they'll still keep making money. Again, check this film out. I think you'll enjoy it, if you haven't seen it already. And that pretty much covers it. There will be a new movie review this week. And next week is the next issue of Nintendo Power Retrospective, where I'll be starting Nintendo Power proper. And I've got some new little format change stuff in there to make things interesting. And I'll see you then.